Alright, hello and welcome back. We're going to be doing another chess video here. So let's go to our rapid time control and start here. Okay, we're against the 1720 playing with the black pieces here. So we're going into a Sicilian defense, and it looks like we have the Bowdler attack. So the response to the Bowdler attack is e6, immediately blunting this diagonal. And then in response to knight c3, we can play knight f6. And we're not afraid of e5 because we have the counter thrust d5 here in this position. Is an important thing to note. And if white doesn't prevent it, we would have played d5 anyway. So d5 here tactically is still sound. And upon take, we plan to take the bishop. And ultimately, the bishop, even though we double our pawns here and sort of have a worse pawn structure, the light squared bishop will be adequate compensation for that. So bishop to b5, we have, it looks like, oh, now they're winning a piece. We have the move knight d7, blocking the check here. And then we can chase away this bishop here. Because we don't want to double our pawns here with, let's say, knight c6, although that would be a decent option as well, threatening to win this pawn. But let's first kick this bishop out, and we can play probably I would rather play bishop I mean, this is a minor difference. Knight takes or bishop takes is good. I will play bishop takes, I think, because I want to leave the c6 square for the knight. I mean, it's a very minor difference. And then we kind of get like a French-like structure a little bit after d4 here, but we can take with c5. We could also, yeah, I think taking is definitely the most straightforward way to do this. We can develop our bishop to c5 afterwards, assuming knight takes. Or we can develop knight to c6 and offer a trade. Bishop to c5 makes probably the most sense here. And we have castles. I think now is a perfect time to castle. In exchange, we can also play knight c6 and trade to get our bishop on the c6 square. I don't think it makes much of a difference. I think we can castle first and then play knight to c6. Okay, now knight to c6 runs into this tactic where the bishop hangs at the end of the sequence. So how do we avoid this? We could play f6, trying to add pressure to the pawn this way. We could even play queen to b6, attacking this pawn and also creating a battery towards this knight here. But it might run into some knight a4 ideas, I mean. So let's see. queen c7 in that regard might be more solid, putting pressure on this pawn before anything else, and then we can let our opponent, I guess, in a way, react to that. Let's play queen c7, keeping everything solid here. Okay, now we have queen to g4. And the queen has come to this side of the board. I think we can take this pawn. However, it might run into a tactic to win back. I guess our bishop takes, and then there may be like takes with the knight, because it threatens checkmate. So then after it takes with a bishop, we're hitting his queen, so he cannot take back this bishop. So I think we can safely take the pawn. I think we can get away with taking this pawn on e5. Because this tactic runs into bishop takes, hitting the queen with tempo. So now I think we're up a pawn, and we will try to maintain our advantage here. Notice our knight is still behind in development. Alright, so we have this try, knight to f3, but we can drop back and guard the bishop, and I think everything is nicely guarded here after that. Let me see, doesn't matter which square we drop back and guard to. I don't think it matters that much, but I am going to go with this square. All right, we have bishop h6 here. And notice how we cannot reinforce it with a piece here to guard it, I don't believe. So let's see, we may actually lose material here, but it feels like I have quite a bit of compensation in the form of central control here in exchange for our rook. So I think if we have to play g6, that's not the end of the world here. And I think that is pretty much forced in this position anyways. So yeah, let's go with g6. And upon capture of the rook, I think I will return my bishop back here and fianchetto it, most likely. All right, that's an interesting move. So we have queen h4, not picking up the rook. So I think we can probably save the rook here. I think we can probably save the rook by going rook e8. Rook e8. And now bishop to f8 in response to this, guarding the checkmate square. How about after knight here, we can drop our bishop? Yeah, I think somehow we are surviving this attack here. Yeah, I think his best option was actually to go for the rook. Let's see. Rook takes in this position also would also blunt the idea of getting a knight in to target the square instead of taking with the king. Knight here, what would our response be to knight e5 in this position? Noticing that the dark squares are weak. I think we can probably take. Okay, now we just have bishop here. Not quite in this position. I don't think we quite. But I think we can drop our queen back or even play. I don't think we can play here because takes and it's guarded by the knight. I think we have like queen d8 hitting the queen and offering an exchange. I think queen d8 is pretty good here because now we're threatening to remove material off the board here. Queen d8. Yeah, and I think even if we had a bishop takes rook earlier in the game, I think still we would have had very good compensation. Now we have like bishop g7. I think is pretty clearly a good move here. Regaining control of the dark squares around our king here and eliminating most threats. That they are posing here, that white is posing. And now knight c6, developing our last piece, probably is very solid. Knight c6 here. And we remain very solid in this position. All right, we have knight to g5 here, and I don't see any real threats that this poses in the position. I don't think we even need to kick the knight here. What it does allow is actually a fork on this square pretty cleanly, I think. I believe that's just like a clean fork because of our bishop being on this d7 square against any pin. So I think this is just like very cleanly forking these pieces, supported by our knight and our bishop here. Okay, and we have queen to h3 threatening this, but now we can kick the knight here. We can kick the knight. For starters, we can kick this knight. And we have all sorts of threats here. We can take this knight, we can push like here, and I believe like everything is hanging. Like almost every piece, white piece on the board will be hanging. Let's say if knight retreats and then back to here, we'll have 3 pieces hanging there. Drastic. Okay, so we don't go with that. He sacks the knight, and the knight is hitting the queen here. So I think we should go for this. Probably we should go for the knight. Since the knight is hitting the queen, we should go for the knight. And this knight is still hanging is something we have to keep in mind. And we have very nice central control here. All right, so he removes that knight from danger, but now I think we have a double attack yet again here. We have e5 hitting the queen, and there's no checks that the queen can pose to get out of that. I don't think, is this a threat after this move? I think we return to g8. If knight to d6 check. So I believe probably this is good. Double threat on the bishop and the queen here. Knight to d6 check, we can return to d8, and then we're not worried about, well, knight to d6 check here, queen b3, bishop here hitting the queen, and both these pieces still hang. So let's do king to g8. The queen is still under threat here. He can try moving it away with check, but we can block with the bishop, again hitting him. He can take, let's say, with the knight here, but then bishop takes, so he could take with the queen, and then we can take the knight. The bishop is still hit, and everything is nicely protected at the end of that line, and he's just down another piece. So we're still threatening double piece here, this and this. Queen b3 is his only check in this position, but it's easily blocked with the knight. All right, so we have queen back to f3, and now I think we can definitely take the bishop here very safely. We can take the bishop and then either move this rook out of the way and defend this square, or find another move in that position. If, let's say, queen recaptures here, he can also capture a rook, and then we'll just capture back with a queen. And be up, I believe, a piece and an exchange in that position. Yeah, so doesn't matter here which piece we take with. I mean, I don't think it is that deep per se. I probably like taking back with a queen slightly more, even though it allows a rook move. I don't think we're really scared of the rooks here. So we're up +4. And after he takes here, it's +3. But then we can start, let's say, offering trades here. Here, queen may come to here with an infiltration. So here also hangs this pawn. We can play queen here, offering a trade, and this very safely defends any infiltration routes, I believe. So here is probably a very solid square for the queen to block any potential infiltrations here. Queen to e5. And then we can activate our rook, let's say. The white queen goes anywhere else. He does not have any new infiltration prospects on this square. So now I will play rook to f8, hitting the queen again and putting it on a tempo. Okay, so we missed, yeah, I missed this check. Let me see. How do I want to go about this? Let's just return to the corner here. And he can take, of course, here. All right. So now our bishop is hanging, and if we're not careful, our knight is hanging. Let's go. Let's go here first. Our pawn is defended here. Everything is defended. And try to coordinate our pieces a little bit better. And then my plan to activate my other pieces towards this king is to go knight e5 and bishop to c6. Notice how, like, I don't even care about this pawn. Surely there's a way we can win it back here if white captures this pawn. Probably win it back with interest here. And I put my king on a square which now it is very hard for him to check. Built a sort of fortress. So we can play knight e5. And a threat there after rook takes would be some sort of discovery here on the rook, probably. So I think knight e5 is still just as solid. And bishop to c6 is also on the way, orienting our pieces here towards the king. So this pawn, I think, is poisoned. This pawn may be free, but then it allows us a tempo to orient our pieces here again. Or let's say fork. One of the pawns off the board here. So bishop to c6, and then followed by like knight check, and then taking with the queen would set up a battery that makes mate pretty much impossible to stop here, is one of the mating themes I'm noticing on the board. So I think that is an idea that I'm going for here with bishop to c6. Setting up along this diagonal here. Also, if this rook ever leaves, of course, he drops the pawn here. Whereupon we orient our bishop as well, and things get pretty disastrous for white. I think this position is essentially resignable for white. Okay, so we have f4. I guess the thing I should have noticed is this actually didn't work right away because of queen takes. So bishop here could just play rook, play queen here for start, but bishop here I kind of like. But then if we run into this, then our bishop is a little bit loose on that square. So I think knight g4, and we're threatening a fork here, is one way to go about it. Still keeping everything defended. If I move the bishop here, the queen could take, and then my knight is like forced to stay there to protect the bishop, right? So then it would be hanging, and we'd have serious problems. But I think this is a solid way to go about it. We're threatening now knight e3, which is a classic fork on the rooks, going for tactical moves here. And we're also threatening pieces. Let's say if the queen moves to an irrelevant square. That'd be a terrible move, but we are putting pressure on this pawn. We're not threatening it because this bishop would drop. So knight e3 probably comes here with like pretty similar effect. Could even take here. Knight e3 is a very good outpost for the knight here we have. Expecting like rook here, probably guarding. And then our bishop can slowly maybe get in here as well. We could have also even played bishop b5 here, would have been another kind of game stopper, probably. And it's still a threat, even if the queen takes here, because this queen supports the bishop as well. So I think basically at this point all roads are leading to Rome here. I'm noticing that this diagonal now has 2 pieces on it. We could play like bishop here, would be a solid way to play. But bishop here and then here, like I was saying, is probably also a very methodical way to do this. Everything is still nicely protected. And like queen takes here, we hit him with this because it's defended by the knight. Double attack on these 2 pieces, and that's basically GG. So this is, it looks undefended, but this counter strike here eliminates the possibility of white taking my a6 pawn. So none of my pieces here are weak. And again, the direct one-move threat here is bishop to d5, getting the classic fork on these pieces, supported by both the knight and queen. So we will see how our opponent responds. And he is running a little bit low on time here. So now we have the rook leaving the f file here, dropping the pawn. And upon this, if we calculate one move deeper, it's going to be checkmate. So he can't actually take this pawn here. So I think queen takes, most direct threat we can put on the board here. And then rook here. We probably just have like queen here. Threatening mate. And if rook returns back, there is mate here with the rook. So I think we can do this. Check here. I think we can definitely do this. Check here. And all of our pieces are still very nicely protected. Rook here hangs mate in 1. Rook takes, and we have successfully exchanged off material. And then if queen takes at the end of this line, bishop here still is a threat. We're threatening mate in 1. If the queen also leaves the diagonal is something we can notice, and we might be able to use that concept to essentially force a checkmate here if we can kick the queen away from this diagonal. So it will be mate probably very shortly here. My pieces are getting slowly and slowly closer towards the opponent's king. With about 2 minutes of thinking time. So our opponent is going to be under even more time pressure here. to defend himself. So if queen takes, we have mate. The queen doesn't have any checks. Queen can queen has to stay on this diagonal. The rook can sacrifice itself, but still mate ensues very, very quickly. So there just is a bunch of bad options left for our opponent right now, unfortunately. Yeah, queen here. We have here, and he doesn't have hardly any checks. He has this check, but then we just defend with a bishop. This pawn is still guarded. So yeah, I mean this just kicks the queen off of its diagonal. Check here, we guard with a bishop. He doesn't fork our pieces because the bishop can just move to guard. And then after that, any other checks, the king hides. This check, the king hides, and then pretty much mate is unstoppable. Except for like rook d2. But then I'm sure there's a way we can force our way into that position here. Rook to d2, we could also take with a bishop and just like brute force method checkmate, I guess. Something like check here, and then rook d2, take with a bishop. Yeah, I mean, this position is lost, so our time runs out. All right, anyway, we've definitely done a Bowdler attack before. It's kind of not theoretical and considered a pretty bad line for white. So let's go over a game review here. A little bit. A little bit of a bad line against white, specifically in the Sicilian, to put your knight on f3 and bishop c4 right away because of the move e6. But we have e4, c5, the Sicilian, the Bowdler attack, and then e6, threatening d5, basically. And you can see, like, it already equalizes. White is not fighting for an advantage whatsoever any move after the second move. And now black is along fighting for equality or even a win here with proper play. All right, so we have knight f6. And the reason we're not afraid of e5 is because of d4 as demonstrated, or sorry, e5 is d5 as demonstrated during the game. We have d5. He can play en passant, but then that just activates one of our bishops. So we have bishop to b5 check, and it looks like, haha, I got you. Like, your knight is still hanging, but the knight can actually move backwards as well. Fun fact. Yeah, but yeah, I'm not trying to be like demeaning or anything with this analysis. Like, bishop b5, we have that. So this is how we deal with it and get our knight to safety. Like, I shouldn't sound too condescending, I guess, with stuff like that. But and then a6, bishop likely has to take, because if bishop drops back here, it's getting like trapped with b5, c4. So yeah, bishop takes, and then I think there's really just small differences here, whether knight, bishop, whatever takes. Bishop takes, I think like most, probably with the most short-term brain here, I want to put my knight on the active square, so I'll capture the bishop. So that's how I decided that ultimately. So d4, c takes d4 is what you want to do most of the times in the Sicilian when the pawn lands on d4. So I took there, and then knight takes. Now maybe I started playing a little bit imprecisely, because I don't know that white should have been allowed to get this over here, get the threat to win material. But anyways, castling, and then we had something like queen to g4 after bishop to e3. So bishop to e3, I played queen c7, yeah, queen c7, reinforcing the bishop this way because I was a little bit afraid of this knight if I were to put my queen on b6. And then we have queen g4, and the threat of this is to win material here. So but I still took this pawn, which it says is absolutely fine. The engine like doesn't really worry about this threat even. So knight f3, and maybe I had to drop back to like, well, no, I still have to defend this bishop, right? So queen c7, and then queen h6. And this didn't feel like I was losing at all. If I pushed g6, it still felt like, okay, I'm losing the rook. But now my dark squares are pretty much my only weakness here. g6 takes, and I would have taken with a bishop in this position. And if you look at this like visually, the dark squares are pretty much the only weakness in my position, and now white does not have a dark squared bishop to like fully exploit that, if that makes sense. So this I felt, and it was a correct feeling, that I had like full compensation for the exchange that I'm down because I have such good central control. I have the bishop pair, and I have good control over the dark squares here. So he actually did not take because he probably had that feeling as well. And he played, did he play knight g5? He played queen h4, which, yeah, that's a little bit, I don't know why he played queen h4. Maybe his idea is like queen here and mate, but it's a little bit like slow. Yeah, rook e8. I definitely missed that. I had probably a better way to get out of this. I have queen d8 offering the exchange right away, because if captures, we'd then save our rook in that method there. And if captures here, we capture, and the material somehow remains still fine. So rook d8 isn't bad, it's just suboptimal here. We could have played queen d8 earlier, but we have bishop f8 first here. Bishop f8 is the only move to save this position by guarding the square. So we have bishop f8 looking for the defense of the checkmate here, and then he drops back and relents here. He's not trying to go for this mate threat anymore. So now queen d8, we drop back our queen and offer up the exchange. And now since the queen remains on this diagonal, bishop g7 kicks the queen away completely and restabilizes my position with very good central and dark square control here. And that's why this position is just totally crushing. So it says we could have gone with d4. I don't know why exactly that works so early. d4, knight takes d4, e5. Oh, it's going for like this a double attack, except a double attack. So knight takes, and then that's the fork, not the other fork. That is the other fork. We're setting up a second fork with our initial. That's kind of a genius concept, but I didn't see that. I just played knight c6, like standard development move. And yeah, knight g5, and now we just have this clean fork here. And everything else basically is just we're trying to common sense our way through this position. So e5 would be a mistake here because, of course, the threat of queen takes h7. So we play h6 first. Don't ever forget to remember your opponent has threats after their moves too, most likely. So we have takes, just sacrificing the knight because he will lose material anyway. And then for the second time, we have this double attack idea. So e5, knight f6, our king, excuse me, returns to g8. Queen f3, and now we can take the bishop. They can take our rook, but whether bishop or queen takes, like, we're totally winning here. And then queen to e5. I don't want to allow our opponent any counterplay here, so I blocked his any and all infiltration routes with this move, offering up a trade. Queen back to f3, and I should have played king h7 here because of this fork that I missed. I missed this fork and played rook to f8, queen b3 fork, and we have the queen down to b7 here. And in this position, I'm just looking at how can I get my pieces oriented and like restabilized here to guard each other and to orient towards the king here. So starting with queen f5, this guards the bishop, it connects the queen and the rook, and it clears the e5 square for the knight to go in and maybe get toward the king. And I'm not really concerned with this pawn because like you can sense there's like so many threats of mates coming up that it does, like, pawns in this position don't really even matter that much. So knight e5, and then we have I should say that I was calculating like against rook takes d4. I was saying something like this would work, knight f3. I think you'd have to play bishop to c6 actually first, kicking the queen away from the defense of the f3 square, and then maybe something like knight to f3 check. Yeah, exactly. And this would now work. I mean, queen takes is probably even stronger now since the bishop is on this diagonal. But yeah, knight to e5, f4, probably trying to kick away our knights here from this idea. But knight to g4 just comes with more threats here. And yeah, the rooks come up. And it's pretty easy to analyze this when we're up so much material. But pretty much at this point, it has to be a forced mate. White is running out of options to defend himself here. He can move back like queen to f2, but we're just like slowly cinching, I guess, like a knot around this position. So going into an analysis of the opening, we have the Bowdler attack again, and we've had that in a previous video. So e5 from the white perspective. Let's go to the black perspective here. E4, c5, the Sicilian defense, and then bishop to c4 immediately is called the Bowdler attack. You can see up here. And there's different ways you can play this. I like to play the immediate e6 against pretty much any and all forms of bishop c4 in the Sicilian. And here the position is already like actually not too good for white because knight f3, and you can already play d5 in this position. and kick the bishop back with tempo here. I mean, bishop can go to b5 check, but we just block with, I mean, the computer likes knight to c6. But if you don't want to double pawns, excuse me, you can go bishop to d7 here, is probably more human. And bishop takes, queen takes, and this position is just like probably even an advantage for black to play. Bishop b5, knight c6, doubling the pawns is also a viable idea, because now they've given up their light squared bishop and you have so much control of the center here, and d4 is likely to just rectify your pawn structure here, and now you just have hanging pawns instead of a hanging pawn structure, I should say. The pawns are not hanging, the structure is a hanging pawn structure. But anyways, I digress from that line. What our opponent played was knight to c3, and here you can outplay the immediate d5, but you can set up a6. I also like to play knight f6 here, is also equally as viable, because they can't really push e5 because of d5, the counter strike here. And in this line, we didn't see this line in the game, but they can take the knight and we take the bishop, and they can take this pawn, for instance, and we can take back with the bishop, of course, and the material remains even, but white now has given up their light squared bishop, and also with it they've given up the g file. For instance, if white were to castle, they could actually run into problems with black using the g file for a mating attack, and likely a speedy fianchetto or reroute this bishop to c6 could support like a kingside attack there. So it's actually like almost decisively better for black here in this position, is what the engine would say. So looking at other variations you could have here, I like to play knight f6. You can play a6 here, and now instead of looking to play d5, you're looking to play like b5 here, and white will have to probably waste tempos playing like a3 in order to like create escape space for their bishop. And now you can play like b5, bishop back to a2, and you could even go for like c4, just like restricting this bishop from ever being useful on this diagonal. The engine doesn't like that. It recommends going like more tempered here, like knight to c6. But now you can see visually like you've got a lot of pawn moves in, and white has wasted a lot of tempo like doing other things and lost. I guess you're the one fighting for initiative now as black. So yeah, knight f6, e5 is not good, but they can play like knight f3 now, and now you can play d5. Now you can play d5 because it's supported by the knight, and then e takes, and we have like a very good position for black here. After like bishop b5 check, you can play knight to c6, and again we don't care about doubling these pawns because it supports the pawn in the center here and basically discourages them from playing d4, which would rectify your pawn structure is the real issue. But castles, you just play bishop e7, bishop e7, getting out of any check ideas here. And then like d4 is there only a chance for equality at that point, and you can just castle and recapture with the bishop if they take. Yeah, d takes and bishop takes, and then this is like pretty much equal for both sides here, just visually an equal position. So that is why the Bowdler attack is not really recommended in any books or I don't know why so many people play it, and it's probably the fact that they play bishop out to c4 and knight f3 in like the Ruy Lopez, or like, I guess I should call it the Italian game, like any king pawn opening, that's what they do, and so they will do the same against like the Sicilian. But it, like the Sicilian, I believe it requires you to adjust your strategy a little bit, or else you will just be playing for equality rather than a win. So that completes, I guess, my analysis on the Bowdler attack. I'm not very impressed with it, and I think it's pretty easy to play against whenever I face it. And that completes my video on the Bowdler. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.